the idea that people opt out is why I opened the book with powers to be used for good. More good people need power. If you opt out, your ability to influence what's going on is going to diminish a lot. As you said, you saw people fall off. You saw people not rise to the top because they said, I don't want to play the game. Well, you don't have to play the game. What I say in my classes that I teach both online and at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, what I say to people is you don't have to do any of this. But if you don't do it, don't complain about, don't complain about the fact that you think these undeserving people are in positions of power or whatever. If you opt out of the game, the odds of you winning the game are essentially zero.
Today's episode sponsor is Aditon, creators of Aditon Operations Kit, the military's go-to software for personnel and equipment accountability. AOK goes where you do, any network, anytime, any place. I got to know Aditon's co-founders, James and JJ, several years ago. They are former Army NCOs who have years of experience in the tech industry. They understand that most military jobs aren't performed behind a computer desk. Personnel and operations are distributed, but accountability of property is paramount to making mission. That's where Logi, AOK's equipment management software, comes into play. Formerly known as 92X, Logi is a next generation of equipment management for the military. Logi offers unrivaled features for military teams on the go. Ingest and digitize your primary and sub-hand receipts. Generate and share sub-hand receipts and DA forms with your team in just a few clicks. Capture photos, tags, and notes across your team to build context on the state of equipment. Get easy on-the-go access to critical property records. Logi is custom built for the modern military professional. It gives you your valuable time back so you can get back to the mission at hand at home or in the field. Whether you're doing monthly inventories or preparing for deployment, Logi is your pocket property book, giving you real-time visibility into equipment status and mission readiness. Logi is currently in use across the U.S. Army Special Forces, and it's expanding. For a limited time, listeners of the From the Green Notebook podcast can try out Logi for free. Visit aditonppbc.com/FTGN-Logi to get started. That's ADYTONPBC.com/FTGN-LOGE. How do I know what I think until I see what I say?
The Green Notebook, carried by military leaders around the world. Within those pages are sweat, tears, triumphs, and the hard-won lessons of life. Lessons worth sharing. Each week, the team dives into the notebooks of military leaders, business professionals, authors, athletes and coaches, and entertainers to share lessons and help you lead with the best version of yourself.
Welcome to another episode of From the Green Notebook. I'm your host, Joe Byerly. And today we're opening up the Green Notebook of Dr. Jeffrey Pfeffer. Dr. Pfeffer is a professor of organizational behavior at the Stanford Graduate School of Business and the author or co-author of 16 books, including Power, Why Some People Have It and Others Don't, and The 7 Rules of Power. His work has influenced generations of leaders who want to understand not just how organizations work, but how power actually operates inside of them. And the topic of power is something I've been studying, researching, and reflecting on since my retirement from the Army. And since originally recording this interview, I've come to define it for myself in this way. Power is a social force that allows one person to shape the behavior of others and, in doing so, to exert control over the world around them. And in this conversation, we dig into the definition of power, the themes that every leader, military or civilian, needs to wrestle with. Like why power isn't inherently bad and how more good people need to learn to use it for good. The difference between power and influence, and why both matter if you want to make real change. Why refusing to play the game guarantees you'll lose it, and what it means to get out of your own way. How things like authenticity, likability, and imposter syndrome can quietly sabotage your effectiveness as a leader, and why networking and visibility aren't dirty words, but essential tools for amplifying your impact. Dr. Pfeffer doesn't sugarcoat anything. He challenges us to see the world as it is, not as we wish it to be, and to recognize that mastering power isn't about ego or manipulation. It's about learning how to get things done, how to lead change, and how to ensure that good people, not just ambitious ones, rise to the top. So, whether you're leading soldiers, managing a team, or navigating the politics of any organization, this episode will help you think differently about what it really means to lead with influence. So, grab your green notebooks and please welcome to the show, Dr. Jeffrey Pfeffer.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me on.
I just finished two of your books. The one I originally wrote you about power, why some people have it and others don't. And then you were like, hey, I've published a newer book. So I read the 7 Rules of Power too. And I guess a great place to start off with is the quote that you open the 7 Rules of Power with.
Yeah, you mean the power is to be used for good. More good people need power.
Yes.
I think that's important. Many people have seen power used for bad things, for malign purposes. My general point of view is that power is a tool. It's like, fire. You can use fire to heat yourself and cook food, or you can use fire to burn down a house. Nuclear power, the same thing. You can blow people up, or you can actually, light up cities. So, power is a tool. It is not the fact that it has been used for ill or for bad purposes does not mean that it's bad. And so I'm trying to get people to embrace the fact that if you're going to, Stanford Business School has a motto: change lives, change organizations, change the world. If you're going to change anything, you need influence. Because if the change were going to happen without influence, it would have happened already.
Okay, so that's my first question. And this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately is what's the difference between power and influence?
So power is the difference between potential and kinetic energy. So power is, you can have power and not use it. But when you use it, it becomes influence. So influence is power in use. And power is the potential to have things come out the way you want in contested situations. People naturally disagree about what should go on or how to accomplish things. And so power is the ability to get your way, and influence is power in use.
And you talk like you open the book with that quote about, more good people need to get power. And, one of the things that I was thinking about as I was reading this and, the part of the background for inviting you on the show is, I climbed the ranks in the military and I watched a lot of people complain about office politics. They would say things like, I don't want to play the game, or I would hear things like, I'm just being me. And I saw a lot of good people fall all to the wayside of the military pyramid as it went to the top. And so I think, one of the points you make is that power is a skill. And just like the attainment of power is a skill. And just like any skill out there, it can be learned. And so I want people who necessarily may not see themselves as players in the game to read this book and not look at the lens of the organization aspirationally, but how things actually happen.
I think that's a very good perspective. The idea that people opt out is why I opened the book with, powers to be used for good. More good people need power. If you opt out, your ability to influence what's going on is going to diminish a lot. As you said, you saw people fall off. You saw people not rise to the top because they said, I don't want to play the game. Well, you don't have to play the game. What I say in my classes that I teach both online and at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, what I say to people is you don't have to do any of this. But if you don't do it, don't complain about, don't complain about the fact that you think these undeserving people are in positions of power or whatever. If you opt out of the game, the odds of you winning the game are essentially zero. You don't have to play football. Football is a hard contact sport. People get injured in football. You don't have to decide to play tennis. You don't have to decide to learn a musical instrument. You don't have to decide to do anything. But if you decide not to pursue power and learn how to master power skills, you can't complain about the fact that your career is dead-ended or that other people that you don't like are in positions of power. So, you either play the game or you don't play the game and you don't complain.
Yeah. And I think that, like, for me, I didn't realize, reading your book and reflecting back on my own career, I realize now that a lot of the things that I did that made me successful were the very things that you talk about in this book. And I'll talk a little bit about this as we go through the rules, but let's talk about the first rule: get out of your own way.
Yeah. Well, that's, I think, the most fundamental rule. It's the rule number one for a reason. And you have already actually alluded to part of what getting out of your own way means. Getting out of your own way means that you have to lose the idea that you're not going to play the game. You have to lose the idea that you're not qualified. You have to get over what is sometimes called imposter syndrome, the idea that you're not as good as some of the other people that you're competing with. You have to get over the idea of that you need to be liked. My friend Gary Loveman, who ran Caesars for a long time, the casino company, has this lovely saying, which I think is fabulous. I'll be liking a dog. A dog will love you unconditionally. You come home, the dog will jump in your arms, wag its tail. It's wonderful. That your job, and this is true in the military, it's true anywhere, your job, people have given you responsibilities to get things done. And sometimes getting things done requires doing things that will not necessarily make you popular. So your job, so you need to get over the idea of that you need to be liked. You need to get over this idea that you need to be authentic. Nobody wants your true feelings. As Adam Grant pointed out in his fabulous New York Times column, "Unless you're Oprah, be yourself" is terrible advice, which I highly recommend people read. You need to get over a bunch of things that hold you back and inhibit your ability to do what other people who are successful are doing.
On that, I just wrote this last week, and I've been reading a lot of Plutarch lately. You talk about the world as it is. Like, people were wrestling with these same challenges 2,000 years ago. And so in one of his essays, he was talking about costumes, and it got me thinking that every role that we're in, there's a set of responsibilities. It's like an unwritten and sometimes written contract, but there's responsibilities, behaviors, and costumes that we wear for each one. And like, for me as the commander, there were a lot of things that I had to moderate my behavior. I kind of turned down the dial on. I was still bringing an aspect of myself to the job, but the job required me to do certain things. It required me to take people's rank. It required me to have people do things that they necessarily didn't want to do. And if I was so worried about being authentic or being, myself, or being liked or being popular, then I wasn't being true to those responsibilities, behaviors, and costumes that came along with that particular role. And so I think when I was younger and a lot more aspirational, I would have, said, be authentic. But now that I've actually been in the seat, you can be authentic to a point. You can put your flavor on something, but at the end of the day, you've got a job to do, just like your friend who ran Caesars, he had a job to do.
I think that's extraordinarily well put. I think that's exactly right. I mean, you've been given a set of responsibilities. You've got to exercise those responsibilities, and you have to do what needs to be done to make the organization successful. So I think it's exactly well said. And one of the things I think people confuse is they confuse their interaction with their friends or with a significant other or with their children, with their work life. And you obviously probably want to have a different relationship with your significant other or with your children or with your close personal friends than you do at work. I mean, work, as you said, at work, in the military or in any other context, you have a set of responsibilities you need to exercise. And it doesn't matter what you particularly feel. I did a case on a guy named Tristan Walker, and I interviewed this person who was the founder of Open Table, the restaurant reservation system. And he said, I'm an introvert. But, if your employees need you to motivate them and do an employee rally, it doesn't matter if you're an introvert. It is part of your job is standing up in front of your employees and laying out your vision and motivating them and getting them excited about the challenge that they're facing. And what you feel and what you would prefer to do doesn't matter. It is part of your job. And that's what you said so nicely in your description, that, you have a job to do, and that job has a set of actions and behaviors and responsibilities. You have to do them.
Yeah. And I going back, and this is something that I don't know if you know about this in the military, and I'm speaking for the Army, but in the Army, the commander, the person who kind of holds the key to whether you get past the next rank, can only select less than 50% of you to receive the rating that's going to take you to the next level. And so if you have 6 people serving side by side with each other, only half of them are going to get past go. And so again, going back to, there's this aspirational aspect of the military that we all like, but the truth is that not everybody is going to be able to move on. And so there's things that we have to do, or at least things we have to be okay with. And for me, I was super competitive when I was younger. And then in my last assignment, when I was no longer competing against the 7 other commanders that I was commanding alongside, there was this I felt a huge relief off. And even the decisions I was making, Professor, weren't geared towards the future anymore. It was just in, what I need to do right now for this organization. But I didn't realize that till I was in that position, that all those other times in the back of my mind was doing the things. Yes, I was focused on my organization, but I also always had in the back of my mind that only a quarter of us, whatever, we're going to get to move to the next level. And I needed to do the things that were going to help, tip the scales in my favor, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
Well, the next thing, the rule number 2 is you talk about is breaking the rules. And this one is one where I think, on the surface, just the name of it would make some military leaders shudder, but you're not necessarily talking about breaking the law or anything like that, are you?
No, I'm talking about basically, I think organizations and individuals basically succeed by figuring out how they can stand out. That oftentimes involves breaking the rules. As I point out in that chapter and in talks that I sometimes give, social change is accomplished only by people who broke the rules. When Rosa Parks refused to sit in the back of the bus, she was breaking the social convention. When the civil rights movement organized the sit-ins at the Woolworth launch counters in the South, where African Americans were not supposed to sit, they were breaking the rules. When Nelson Mandela became the founder of South Africa, while he was literally in prison, he was breaking the rules. He was breaking the apartheid laws, which is why he was, in fact, in jail. So social change occurs only by people breaking with rules and laws and social convention, and change occurs only by breaking with rules and laws and social convention. And we take things for granted, and I have a very good friend who I use occasionally as an example in 7 Rules of Power, named Laura Esserman, who's an amazing breast cancer surgeon, an amazing oncologist, and an amazing person trying to lead change in drug development and many other things. She teaches at the University of California, San Francisco, which is UC's medical school in the San Francisco Bay Area. And she has this lovely line, because she breaks the rules all the time. I mean, she goes against conventional wisdom. It's one of the reasons why she's been able to save people who've otherwise been considered to be incurable. I mean, she will tell you several things. Number one, everything she learned about treating breast cancer when she was a student at Stanford Medical School is now obsolete. So if you did not break with what was at one point conventional wisdom, there would be no progress in medicine. I mean, we've learned a lot. Secondly, she often will smile and say, "Who made the damn rules anyway?" I mean, so So she is very much a rule breaker, and is known for defying conventional wisdom. It's gotten her into, in quotes, trouble with the American Cancer Society. Though on the other hand, they gave her their highest award. It's gotten her into problems with the Susan Komen Foundation. They also gave her the highest award. I mean, she has a very, at the time, it was completely unconventional. When I tell you what it is, you'll say, it makes common sense to me. She said, we the American Cancer Society guidelines for breast cancer screening is every woman beyond a certain age needs to have a mammogram once a year. And she said, this is ridiculous. There are some women, because of their genetic history or their prior exposures, should be probably screened every 3 or 4 months. And there's some women who don't need to be screened every 5 years. So why not have screening tailored to the risk profile of the individual, as opposed to have, this one size fits all? That got her into trouble. She also published a paper with a colleague of hers that demonstrated that actually the screening for prostate cancer and breast cancer actually has not reduced the mortality rate. And we could go into why that is. But in any event, so she has, I think, been throughout her career someone who has, who's challenged conventional wisdom. And I think if you're going to make change, you have to challenge conventional wisdom.
There's another story that I'm thinking about too, because again, military podcast is, I think it was like 1929 or early 1930s, 2 mid-grade officers in the Army, a lieutenant colonel and major, went out one day and played around with the tank and started talking about these ideas for how it should be used in combat. And it went against the conventional wisdom, against the doctrine. And one of them was pulled into the commandant's office and said, if you publish anything like that again, we're going to court-martial you. And those 2 officers were Dwight Eisenhower and George Patton. And they went on in World War II to, push against a lot of the convention. And we saw what happened. And even this in modern day, like the commanders who I've seen make the most progress and do right by the organization are the ones who are willing to do wrong by the organization, so to speak, is not be bound by, a lot of policies and bureaucracy, but to push through that, to create change. And they were able to, and still able to, bring like a wake of power along with them.
No, I'd say there's a famous case that my colleague Mike Tushman at Harvard Business School has taught for a gazillion years. It's entitled Gunfire at Sea. And it is a naval equivalent of the story that you just told, where this relatively low-ranking officer on a ship. This is, of course, from the 1800s. And, you fire cannons. But the problem with firing cannons from a ship is that guns from a ship, is that the ship is moving. One minute you're firing it into the sea or into the air or whatever. And he came up with a way of making the gunfire much more accurate. And the same thing it was resisted initially, and then it was adopted.
Yeah. So for anybody that's like, I want to learn more about that story, it's Admiral Sims is the guy, and he actually had to appeal directly to the Secretary of the Navy at the time, Theodore Roosevelt, to get through all the bureaucracy and get the way we do naval gunfire changed. So that's an awesome story. So thanks for bringing that one up. I'd like to introduce you to our newest partner, Roger Bank, a modern digital military bank built by military members for military members. Whether you're stationed stateside or overseas, Roger is designed to meet the unique needs of our men and women in uniform. I recently opened an account myself, and the process was incredibly smooth. It took less than 10 minutes from start to finish. Now, here's why I'm excited to partner with Roger. They offer high-yield checking and savings accounts, 0 account fees, early payday, and automatic savings with Roundup Match. Their military-ready direct deposit form is even auto-populated and signed by the CEO, saving you time and hassle. Plus, you get free global ATM access, real person customer support, and they even offer accounts for service members as young as 17. Funds are FDIC insured through Citizens Bank of Edmond, so you can bank with confidence and peace of mind. Visit roger.bank to learn more. That's ROGER.bank. Another rule is to appear powerful. So what does that look like?
So, I think we respond to how people look. We respond to how they talk. We respond by far the least importantly to the content of what they say. So I think you want to have a look. You want to show up in a powerful fashion. I'm not suggesting, plastic surgery or anything. It's interesting. I had the privilege of knowing the late Jack Valenti, who for 38 years was head of the Motion Picture Association of America. Jack Valenti was 5'4". I mean, that is just a physical fact. But when he came to my class, I still remember the first time he came to my class. After the next class, I said, "What did you all think?" And a woman said to me, "He's short, but he feels big." In the sense that you can show up in a way and think about how you dress and how you speak and the tone of voice you use, etc., in a way that conveys power. And we respond subconsciously to how people look. I mean, you can go to the zoo and see, the gorillas. Some of them are beating their chest and puffing things out, peacocks, etc. And so even in the animal kingdom, we respond to how people show up. And so you need to show up in a powerful fashion. You need to speak with confidence. Confidence is often assumed to reflect competence. So, you need to show up in a confident fashion. I say this, many of the students at Stanford, of course, go on to start their own companies. There's this very entrepreneurial culture. And if you're gonna get people to invest in you, you can't show up and look modest and hesitate and have ums and ahs and whatever. You got to act like you know what you're doing. The late Andy Grove, one of the co-founders of Intel, has this lovely line. He said, "Half the time when we were starting Intel, I didn't know what I was doing." But you can't. So sometimes you have to act like you know what you're doing, even if you don't.
Yeah, and I've talked about this before on the show. There have been times where I have been so unsure of what I was doing, but the job I was in didn't allow for that. Like I didn't allow, like nobody gave a crap that I was hesitant, that I was scared, that I was trying to figure it out. So I would just say, like, what would a person who was really good at this job and who knew what they were doing, how would they act and what would they say and what would they do? And that's what I would do. And it ended up working out for me. Eventually I figured it out. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that sometimes, like, again, going back to rule number one, get out of your own way, is that people try to keep it real, keep authentic. And people don't want to see a leader who is super hesitant, who seems scared and timid in a leadership role.
That's exactly right. So I can understand now, having talked to you for this little bit of time, why you did well in your Army career.
Oh man, thank you. I'm going to keep this part in there. I want to talk about the next thing, and this is another rule where people, it feels gross, I think, but again, you're talking about human nature, building a brand.
I mean, every company builds a brand. A brand statement is, a short description of how your life experience and how your background has brought you to where you are and made you uniquely qualified for that job. So I alluded earlier to my example of Tristan Walker. Tristan Walker was an African-American man who found that the conventional razors did not shave because of the difference in African-American skin. And he went to, a bunch of drugstores and found that there were basically no products, both hair products and skincare products. There was almost no products, and they were certainly not prominently displayed for people of color. And of course, the Latino population in the U.S. is the fastest growing segment of the U.S. population, and the African-American population is a significant population. So he started Walker and Company brands to make product for these underserved markets. He began with a razor, and then he went into other products as well. He was eventually bought by Procter & Gamble. And before he launched Walker and Company, he was an entrepreneur in residence at Andreessen Horowitz, which is, I think, now called A16, the venture capital firm. And he was, he was trying a bunch of stuff that everybody else was doing. And Jeff Jordan, the open table guy who is now at Andreessen Horowitz, he said, one of the things we look for in founders is a founder business fit. In other words, what about the business that this founder wants to found makes this individual uniquely qualified to do this? So here you have Tristan Walker, a Black man, founding a company to make products for Black men and Black women, and then Latino women and Latino men in an underserved market. So he has a life story that makes him uniquely qualified to do that. So you want to build a brand, and then you also want to, I think, transmit that brand. You want it to be known by somebody other than your significant other and your children and your mother and father. So you need to get the brand out into the world through LinkedIn and giving talks and getting yourself invited to conferences and whatever. I think publicity is important.
Yeah, and a couple of things on this. And this is me looking back on a career in retrospect. But I started from the Green Notebook when I was a captain in 2013. And I spent the next decade plus writing about leadership, leader development, sharing my thoughts on it. And, I'm doing it out of, because I want to write, because I want to create, because I want to help people. But like when I look at through the rules of power, when I look at it through that lens, I'm transmitting my brand to everybody. I'm telling people that I'm into leader development, that I'm into reading, the things that we're promoting in a military profession. And so I'm basically just transmitting a business card out there all the time with consistency. And that, now like, I'm like, okay, yeah, I did. I built a brand. That wasn't the plan. But like here I am wearing a shirt from my website and a hat. So I guess I'm wearing the costume of it, but I think that is important. And I think, for you, Professor, like right now, the chief of staff of our Army wants people to write and to publish in our journals and on blogs and stuff like that. So I think that's a really good way to, if you're looking at it through a career progressive, career enhancement lens, is by using this to build your own personal brand.
And also, I think as you just described, it also helps you transmit knowledge. I mean, most people are pretty bad mind readers. So if you have an idea in your head and you don't put it out in some format or a variety of different formats, nobody will ever know. So if you want to share your knowledge with the world, you have to actually do what you did, which is share your knowledge with the world.
And to build that brand and to share that knowledge, I think is a great segue into the next lesson, which is to another like gross one. It feels like for a lot of folks, but it's really important, is to network relentlessly.
Well, if leadership management is getting things done through other people, it seems only like common sense that the more people you know, the more you'll be able to get done. I mean, we live in an interdependent world in which we rely on other people to help us. We will, and we give them help in turn. And so you need to expand your network. There's absolutely no question about that. And if you're not spending 6 to 8 hours a week meeting people, you're not spending enough time building social relationships. And and also I think we mostly spend time with the people that we know well and we like and that are close to us in terms of our friends and family and close work colleagues. But the problem with them is that they know pretty much the same people and the same things that we do. And that's why one of the keys to successful networking is to build a lot of weak ties to people with people that you don't necessarily see all the time and that certainly are different from you. But the more different people you run into and the more different people you know, the more likely it is that you will see new opportunities and learn new things. I mean, if you spend all your time talking to people who know the same things and the same people you do, it'll be comfortable, but you won't learn anything.
When you say weak tie, like how does that help?
Well, because you learn non-redundant information and build non-redundant contacts.
Yeah, I was thinking about like one of the people I looked up to early in my career was General H.R. McMaster, who's a
course.
resident there at the Hoover Institute. And I was working for him, and I remember it seemed like he had his feet in various social circles, in academia, in the political sphere, in the military sphere. And I was watching him interact with each of those and learning from it. And I guess like that became a model for me, as I continue to go up. And so, in my own social circles, it's folks in the literary world, it's folks in the military, it's folks in other enterprises. But I've learned so much more. And then I think we're able to bring that stuff back
Of
to,
course.
it gives us I feel like it gives you a competitive advantage when you're able to bring stuff from those weak tie relationships into the sphere of work where you're at.
You're absolutely right. There's a lot of research that demonstrates the truth of what you're talking about. So it's a networking. I mean, many people find networking dirty or unpleasant or whatever. But networking also, successful networking is an act of generosity. I mean, networking is figuring out how you can connect people who would benefit from being in touch with each other. So it's not just, you going to a cocktail party and collecting business cards. It's you figuring out what people want and need and what their agenda is. And, do I know somebody in my social circle who could be helpful to them, or vice versa? And then making that connection.
Yeah, there's and I think, for folks listening in the military, especially like if you're a commander, I was able to help more of the people who worked for me get jobs that were outside the normal career path because I had connections and relationships outside of it. So I was able to connect people who had questions about different branches, different special mission units to those people. And I was able to get them down that path, something that I wouldn't have been able to do personally because I didn't have experience. Well, I want to skip over 6 and 7. And so if you are interested in learning what 6 and 7 are, then you have to read Professor Pfeffer's book on the 7 rules of power. But this is something that I've been examining a lot lately, is the allure of power and how it draws people. And, like people have written for millennia about it, it's allure. And I know you're a fan of Robert Caro's work, and my favorite quote from The Power Broker about Robert Moses is, "Some men aren't satisfied unless they have caviar. Moses would have been happy with a ham sandwich and power." And so, for you, why is it such a draw? And does power corrupt? Does power reveal? What's your take on it?
Well, I don't think power corrupts. Once you have power, I think it permits you to, as I said earlier, to get things done and to accomplish many things. Power, and by the way, not everybody, I think, is attracted to power. Many people say, I don't want it, because power has a price. In the first book you mentioned, Power, Why Some People Have It and Others Don't. I have a chapter on the price of power. One of the things that power does is it makes you much more visible, and then so people are going to scrutinize everything you do much more once you have power. That's number one. Power also, it requires a lot of effort to get it and maintain it, and not everybody wants to expend that effort. It makes you a target of envy and resentment. Nobody says, you're at the bottom, that's where I want to be. There's much more attempt. I had a friend of mine, a woman who does consulting with CEOs of Swiss financial services firms. And she said, when you become CEO, when you become a general in the Army, many people are going to look at you and say, why you and not me? And people will try to, in the case of the CEO, some of them will wait until you leave. Some of them won't in terms of getting your position. So power makes you a target, as well as making you visible. And so not everybody wants power. But I did this podcast for a couple of years called Pfeffer on Power. And one of my guests was a guy named Michael Grun, who is very well connected. media influencer, social. He knows everybody. Um, and what he said to me is that I have a choice between power and money. I would pick power. Money will sometimes get you power, but not all rich people, in fact, have power. But power will almost invariably get you money and free trips and free this and free that. And so power, I think, has comes with a lot of perks. Power also, and I end the power book with this quote or with this idea. There's a guy, a British epidemiologist, Sir Michael Marmot, who's done these studies, and he found this observation that in the British civil service, your higher you rank in the British civil service, your lower your risk of cardiovascular disease. And he explored why that was. And it's not that they necessarily have more education or that they smoke less or have better genetics. The power gives you the ability to control your life. And one of the most stressful things in the world is to not have control over what you do, when and how you do it. And so power gives you freedom and autonomy. And that autonomy helps you have a healthier life because it reduces stress.
And so I guess my next question then, and we'll start wrapping this up, is like I noticed it when I was in command that there were at times where like my ego would almost take over. And, like I would demand things. I would be like, well, why am I not getting this? And there were times where I would caught myself at a crossroads of power giving me the opportunity to act whichever way I wanted. Even though it may have been like kind of against what I believe or what I value. So for folks who are interested in attaining power, what would you suggest? And I'm asking this knowing that you don't teach ethics at all, but what would you suggest they do to kind of safeguard themselves? Because one of the things that you have written about is that power kind of opens up your inhibitions when you do have it. And so I know in the military, that gets a lot of us in trouble when we're in positions of power and we aren't self-regulating. So what would you suggest to somebody? That was a very long question, by the way.
No, that's okay. It's a very interesting question. So, I think everybody needs some version. The Wall Street Journal talks about this as a personal board of directors. I think you need a set of people who you trust, who are not in a position to be competitive with you or in different spheres or different domains or different organizations or whatever, who will tell you the truth, and people that you trust and you will listen to. So I think you need, just as a company needs a board of directors to give them objective advice and to hold them accountable, I think you need it. People need boards of directors, small set of trusted confidence who will tell them the truth, who will give them advice, and who will hold them accountable.
Because, and I guess this is what I would throw back to you, is in all your studies, and the one thing I love that you talk about is that, let's look at human nature for what it is, not what we want it to be. And so that with power comes all these temptations. So by having these people in your life and around you, you are safeguarding yourself against the realities of power.
I think that's extremely well put. I think that's exactly right.
Awesome. Well, I guess in that case, Professor, one other point, and then we'll wrap this up. One of the things that I keep a notebook while I've been reading your book of a reading list on power, because in both books, 7 Rules of Power and the book Power, you are like a gateway drug for Amazon, for articles and different research studies. So for folks interested in learning more about power, besides reading your books, what other books would you recommend on it?
Well, you mentioned one or several. I mean, I think Robert K. Rowe has been fascinated with power for a long time. The Power Broker is a long read. Maybe you want to listen to it rather than read it. But the story of Robert Moses, who was, became Parks Commissioner, but even though that doesn't sound like a position of enormous power, he basically built much of New York City and influenced urban development all around the world. Robert Caro, Caro, has also written a series of books about Lyndon Johnson called The Path to Power. His first book is about Johnson's early career and how Johnson went as an aide to a Texas representative, didn't even know. That's it. That's it. You got the books. You know these books. How he went to Washington as a kind of not a very sophisticated guy from Texas, a young man, and became extremely powerful. And how then there's a Master of the Senate, which talks about how he took this nothing job and turned it into becoming the youngest majority leader in the history of the Senate. He's now writing a fifth book. But in any event, there are 4 volumes of him on Lyndon Johnson, which I think are fabulous case studies of power.
Well, Professor, thank you so much for your time today. This was a great discussion, and it's been one that's been kind of rattling around in my head for a while now.
Yeah. Well, it's a pleasure being with you. And you clearly have thought and continue to think a lot about this topic. And that, I think, would be another thing that I think your listeners ought to do, which is instead of saying, I don't want to have anything to do with power, whatever, learn about it. There is, in fact, an enormous social science literature. There are fabulous biographies about people. Some of them are not nice people, but, some of them are. And, I think your readers ought to read more.
I love that. That's a perfect way to end. And I agree with you. Again, well, thank you for your time today. This was an awesome discussion.
And thank you for inviting me on the Green Notebook. It's a pleasure.
Thank you again for listening to another episode of From the Green Notebook podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please give us 5 stars wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps us gain visibility and the opportunity to help more people on their leadership journey. Also, make sure you check out our website at www.fromthegreennotebook.com. There, you can listen to past episodes, read leadership articles written by military leaders from around the world. You can sign up for our monthly reading list email where you can learn about new books that are coming out, and our Sunday reflection email that comes out every Sunday morning. Is really short. It's a 2-minute read, but I guarantee you it's going to start your week off on the right foot. Finally, make sure you follow us on Twitter at FTGN Notebook, and you can find us on Instagram and Facebook by searching for From the Green Notebook. Again, thank you so much for coming on this journey with us. I am humbled by the opportunity to learn these lessons alongside you. So please join us next week for another episode of From the Green Notebook, where we're going to help you lead with the best version of yourself.
I came from the mud. There's dirt on my hands. Strong like a tree. There's roots where I stand. Oh, I've been running from the law.